we have almost completed our plugin, but at the moment our plugin is totally static. What I mean from static is that, let's say our user wants to name portfolios as projects. So how they can do that? Or whatever their need is, they want to use the plugin as per their own needs or requirements. Okay, so to make a plugin dynamic, we create settings or options for the plugin. From there, users can play with the plugin settings to rename the plugin as per their requirements. It's only for an example, but we can provide everything in the options which we want users option to give, so they can customize the plugin totally as per their own needs. For example, we can give users option to select the color of the filters. All right, so we can give users option like styling of these cards. All right, so we can almost give users options to do almost everything we can imagine of. All right, so how to do that? For that, we will be using WordPress Settings API in this tutorial, and we will be creating our settings page. So from that page, users can customize the plugin. All right, without wasting any of time, let's quickly jump into the development. All right, so we were here in the portfolio main class, so where we created our class. So I feel we already done a lot in this class, but we can now create a separate class for the settings. All right, so we will be managing all our settings from there. So I am simply going to create a class, and I am saving it with the name of like class, and we can say it's some sort of creative portfolio settings. All right, so this is a PHP class portfolio. All right, so we have created our class. What we will be doing in this class? First of all, as we always do, we have to make sure this class is not accessible from direct path. All right, so if anyone tries to access the class from the absolute URL, we will be simply exiting. Now we have to simply create our main class for the settings. So like we create any class, we can name it anything we want. So I will be giving it name something like this. Okay, WP underscore creative underscore portfolio underscore settings. This is our main class. Here we can create a properties variable named as options. We can name it whatever we want to use. We will be coming to it a bit later. How actually settings work and what we are going to create. Simply, we will be creating a menu under the settings, and we will be giving some name to this menu, like we can say creative portfolio or creative portfolio settings. All right. So first of all, we have to create a menu, because once we create a menu, then we can create a page based on that menu. So how to create that menu? WordPress gives us admin menu hook to create that those menus. All right, so we can create our main function construct, and inside that function we can create our hook. The name of that hook is admin menu. All right, so now to this hook we can pass our callback function. What is our callback function? So we can say it something like whatever we want to do. Simply we can say something like add settings page. All right, so what this will do, this will do once WordPress is rendering the menus, so WordPress will be looking for our callback. All right, so now it's time to create our callback, and I can simply create something like here, and I can I made a mistake. Let me copy, and we can we can add some comments. All right. Okay, so how we create a page. WordPress gives us add options page function, and there we pass our parameters. So next is we can create simply that page. All right, so it is a function, and what is inside this function? It's inside this function we create first of all the name of our, we can say it like something as the name of our page of the setting. So whenever settings are created, what we want to give the name of the page upon clicking that menu for the settings. Like once we click a settings page, it will be obviously going to a page. So what we want to keep the name of that page. All right. So we can simply say something like WP create a portfolio settings, and obviously it is translation ready. So we have to pass our translation string. All right. So what we want to give name to our menu, what I mean from that is like what is the name of this menu? Themes, design, customize. So what we want to keep name of our menu, that will be coming in this second parameter. So I will be saying it something like creative portfolio. All right, so obviously it is translation ready to. Okay, so next comes capabilities. Like we already discussed this in our previous security related video. So capabilities, so we want to give it to only to those users who are having at least admin access. All right, so what we want to give name of the slug or name of the page. Okay, let me show you what it means. If we see, this is a slug of the current page. All right, so what we want to give name of our page as a slug, that we can say something like, I think it is like this. So it stays with our same format which we are having so far, like WP creative portfolio. All right, and finally we have to provide our callback function. Why this callback function? This is the actual function once we are uh, hitting the menu. So this function will be run, which will be generating our actual page. So we can create something like create admin page. All right, so we have created our first page, settings page. Now if you see, we don't have any callback function at the moment, and if we try to view anything, we will be having issue. So it's better we can create our page function. All right, so the name of our function is, it is something create admin page. All right, that was the name. To be certain, I am simply copy pasting it. All right, okay, all right, and nothing is here. Now what we have covered, we have created our main class, and inside the construct we have created our first settings menu, and we have named it as creative portfolio, and the callback page's name is WP creative portfolio settings, and capabilities are of admins, and we have given it a slug as WP dash creative dash portfolio, and our callback function to run is here. So what's next? The next thing is we have to simply create an object of our class, and that's all. So we can simply, I feel we can simply include our class with here. If I just copy paste this very same class, and we can just name it like this. All right, so the name of our class is class dash WP dash creative dash portfolio dash settings dot php. All right, and next comes to create object from our class. So here we are we are running our plugin here. So here we can simply create our class object exactly. So it was settings, I think it was something like that. To be certain, we can simply copy our class name and paste it. All right, and now if I see, The thing is there, if everything is fine, we'll be seeing a settings option. All right, here it is. Create a portfolio page is created, and if to be certain, I can just page. All right, so I can show you if that is the case, and it is loading our page. All right, so here it is. I can simply rename it to show you from where our page name or menu name is coming. All right, so next step is I am simply going to open it in another menu, sorry, another tab. Perfect. Now things to remember are, here is the slug of our page, WP dash creative dash portfolio, which is coming from here. All right, so we are successfully going to this page, but why we are seeing it blank is the reason that our page creation is like this. If I simply create some HTML, all right, and now if I reload the page, that HTML should show up here. All right, so our page is showing up perfectly. So we have created our settings page, our menu is all good, our settings page callback is running. So far everything is going as per the requirements. All right, so what's next? Next thing is we have to create our settings. But how we will be creating our settings? For that, as you got it, we can run any of our HTML in the page. So first we can create some sort of a HTML which WordPress uses. Like WordPress uses wrap as main name for the section, so we can use it. And then obviously we can have some proper heading, like we created h2, but now we should have a proper heading for the page, like someone who sees our page and knows what's going on. So underscore e, translation ready. Exactly, translation ready, print or echo. So if we want to echo anything and we can want to translate ready, so we can simply use underscore e function. All right, so we can say it's something like WP creative portfolio settings. All right, obviously our language text domain. All right, now if I simply view my page again, it should be showing our heading. Perfect. All right, so now our heading is there. Next thing comes is that we have to create our fields. From fields, what we want to create, we want to create few fields, like the we want to give user name of our portfolio, so they can change that name as per their needs. So they can also change the name of the portfolio's name here, and they can change the slug of the portfolio. How to do that? To do that, we have to simply create a form. All right, so what this form will be doing, this form will be actually of a method post, and it will be going to the actions page of options page, sorry, the action of the form will be to the options page. All right, so it is as we are using settings API, so it is by default will be going to the options page. How it will be going to the options page? We can simply use something like submit button function. So this function is something which creates a button on the page, and once this button is submitted, it will be putting all the form data and will be posting it to the options.php, where we will be handling it. All right, so what we want to give the name of this button, we can say something like save settings. All right, and obviously our text domain will be going here like this. Now I have to refresh it to say see what's going on. All right, so if you see, save settings a default button of the forms which WordPress uses. All right, so now our form, our page and our form has a button. But how to create these fields? Obviously we can create as many fields here as we want. How to do that? Let me show you. Instead of creating each field here like we created a button, I can simply create a callback, and we can get the group of our portfolio which we will be creating shortly. Right, dp create a portfolio group. So we will be creating our group of fields hopefully in the next video, and then this function will be showing all fields here as intended. All right. And one more thing, as I shown you in the previous video, is to have some sort of a section creation and nonsense. All right. So if we see, we have created a nonce for the form settings field, which will be generated from the code here. But for the group of the fields, we will be covering in the next video, because if we cover everything in this particular one video, it will be becoming too large for us to handle. So to generate our fields from a function, we can simply call a function which we will be using in our next video, but we can give it a name like this. All right. So what we have done so far, we have created our page callback which renders our page, and inside that page we created our custom html, and we created our page settings title, so to give users what this page actually does. And inside that we created a form, and inside that form we created first of all our we created our nonce, like we discussed this in more details in our previous videos. If you can check, it will be giving you more details about it. What this does, it creates a hidden field and nonce which WordPress, as we are using WordPress settings API, it will be verified automatically. All right, to you know save us from the scam and other phishing things like that. All right. And then comes our settings section. What this settings section is does, it will be creating our section of all the settings which we will be covering in our next video, and all the settings will be printed here inside the form. And finally we created our submit button, which once we submitted, will be submitting all our exactly are our setting options to the options.php, which we will be handling in our next video. All right. So if I just go to the front end and see what's going on, everything seems to be fine. All right, because default methods are being used. And if I simply to check to show you what's going on, obviously we don't have that group created yet, which we will be creating in our next video. To keep things simple in this particular video, we have created a settings menu, and we have created our settings page. And in the next video we will be creating our actual settings, and we will be storing those settings, and then finally we will be using those settings in our actual front end. All right. In the meantime, have a nice time and see you in the next video. Bye bye.